My name's Jo. Hopefully I'll leave some time for you to ask me questions, but if I don't, please feel free to interrupt, because I do kind of get on a bit of a roll, and I've got quite a lot I want to tell you, so we've got a lot to cram in half an hour. So really what I'm focusing on today is healthy feet, healthy profit. So if our cows have got healthy feet, at the end of the day we're all in it to make money. We want good healthy cows, we want them producing lots of milk, and we want to make money out of them at the end of the day. So how many dairy guys have we got in the group? Okay, we've got a good number today. Anybody that's not dairy? Have we got beef or sheep? Beef? Okay. Beef and sheep. Okay, well they've all got feet. What have you got? Beef and sheep. So we've all got feet, so we're on the right track. So everything I'm going to talk about, you'll find that I refer to dairy cattle, but hopefully it's all relevant for you when we're thinking about the feet and the impact on animal welfare and the impact on your pocket. So what I'm going to go through briefly in the half-hour slot is the main causes of lameness, the foot structure, because I think when we're talking about cow mobility, unless you know what you're dealing with your foot structure and your key lesions, then how can you think about preventing them? What do you want to do? You know, you need to understand the core parts of what we're dealing with in order to help you prevent them. So I'll do a little bit on structure, a little bit on why bother. So why are we worried about lameness? Well, obviously it's the impact on our pocket, as we talked about. And the last sort of 5-10 minutes, we'll hopefully, there's 3 cows in there, so we'll hopefully get some out and have a look at some actual cows walking around. So, when we're talking about cow mobility or lameness, as you all know, there's lots of things that affect how animals walk. It's very multifactorial, and there's a lot of anecdotal best practice out there about, you know, what we do with these things. And before I get on a roll, DairyCo produce loads of literature to help you basically deal with lame cows. There are some copies out there, but if not, get them on the website. So we've got general hoof care about sharpening knives, dealing with lesions, identifying lesions. That's a really good pocket guide. We've got cow track stuff. I might not get a chance to talk about it, but some really good stuff about foot bathing. So making sure you're getting the best out of your system and getting the best value for money out of your foot bathing system. And we've got loads of resources on mobility scoring as well, so do grab them if they're there, and if not, order them on the website. So assessing cow mobility, it's not a one-trick pony, unfortunately, and there's no magic answer that can help you sort lameness in your animals out, and there's lots of things have an impact on it. So foot hygiene, why do you think foot hygiene is relevant when we're talking about cow lameness? Pardon? Digital dermatitis, yeah. So when you're thinking about assessing your risk and what you're dealing with at home, you really need to think, is it an infectious type problem you've got at home, or is it more a horn problem? So something to do with what they're standing on, how they're handled. So when we're talking about foot hygiene, it's thinking about, you know, the slurry pooling, how often they're scraped out, and what's the housing period down here for cows? Most of the time, yeah. So you've got some herds that are housed all year, haven't you? And they're basically standing in wet conditions the whole year round. You've got others that we assume go out to nice dry conditions. But if you get a wet year like last year, actually you could argue they've got wet feet all year round as well. And what's the importance of that? Well, actually, cows' feet and any type of horn is actually quite porous, you know. So this is a plasticized foot. You can see it's being cut in half, just to give you some detail really on what the internal structure of a foot looks like. And it's extremely porous. It's like a sponge. So when a cow's been in water a couple of hours, it actually is saturated. You know, we talk about soil being saturated. Well, horn is no different, and it takes a long time to dry out. So when we're talking about foot health, and actually what our cows are standing in with regards to hygiene, it's really important when we're talking about infectious diseases. So when we move on to walking surfaces, if we stay on that soft horn thing, so imagine a wet horn is soft horn. Why does that matter, particularly when we're talking about walking surfaces?
Stand on stones that will get lodged in the feet.
That's right. So if we've got soft feet and porous feet, walking them up this kind of track, and I don't know whether the cows use this, but if you're going up and down this 4 times a day and your feet are soft, so if I cut the back out of all your wellies, and I asked you to walk up and down here 4 times a day, you'd soon feel it, wouldn't you? Or any of you that got Noras and you get the thin soles, you soon start to notice stones, don't you? And what about if I crowded you all together so you were completely in a tight bunch, and I forced you up that hill or up this track with maybe a dog nipping at your heels and a bit of alkathene pipe behind you? What would that impact do you think that would have on your feet? You'd be scuffing, you'd be slipping, you'd be treading on these bits of stone that probably you would choose not to walk on normally. And again, so if we're talking about horn problems with feet, not only is it about what surfaces they're walking on, but it's about how we handle them. So thinking about how you handle stock up and down tracks, so whether we stand back and let them put their heads down and pick their way through, or whether we drive them, and not just on tracks but on concrete as well. So where do you think the sort of high pressure points are on concrete?
Well, and feeders.
That's right, feeders, standing at the feed fence, collecting yard. What about collecting yard?
In the parlour.
In the parlour. So when you get back tonight, those of you that are milking cows and you put your backing gate down, what you should be looking at is that every single cow in the herd has got its head down, even in the collecting yard, because you don't want to hear them skidding. You don't want to hear that sort of damage going on and potential damage to the white line, which we'll come to. So you want a clean, comfortable lying space. I know you've done a bit already of this with another speaker. How long should they be lying down for?
9 to 14 hours.
Yeah. So 14 is your ideal, but obviously it depends how long your milking is and all your other routines. And why is that important for feet?
Give them a rest.
Give them a rest, yeah. So it's important that your cubicle's comfortable, so you're looking for minimal damage like hock damage and bangs and rubs and lesions, but also you want them off the feet, don't you? You know, you don't want them standing around, you know, like you're looking here and you can see the cows are off their feet, they're lying there, they're hopefully ruminating. So you've got a cow that's being milked, you want her to come out and eat at the feed fence, and then you want her lying down, chewing her cud and ruminating to produce milk. And the double benefit is that she's off of her feet as well, she's resting her feet. So having comfortable cubicles is imperative. Foot bathing, is anybody foot bathing at home? Yeah. And what do you foot bath for? Yeah. Formalin as a preventative. So it's about Duchy. So again, we're talking about these infectious diseases linked to kind of the foot hygiene side. So although we don't know much about Duchy, we do know that it's linked to the hygiene aspects of a building, and we do know that it's passed from cow to cow. So probably my key points from today's talk are identify your risks. So what is your problem at home? Is it an infectious problem, such as something like Duchy? And what do you need to do to prevent that? So we're very focused on the treatment end, but not enough on the prevention end. Or is it a horn problem, where you're getting things like your white line problems and your sole problems? And again, what do you need to do to go back 10 steps and prevent that, rather than looking at the sort of treatment end? And finally, we'll do some mobility scoring at the end, which is very focused on picking these cows up early and treating them early, which I think as an industry we've not really been focused on. I think we've been very focused on treating them when they're lame rather than when they're early lame. So cost of lameness, well, why is it important? You know, why would we bother treating lameness when we're talking about any livestock? And these are the things really that influence the cost of lameness to our business. So we get a yield reduction. When do you think the yield starts falling off on a lame cow?
As soon as they first get.
Yeah, so it's about 4 months, as somebody's just said. So you start seeing the yield drop off before they're actually lame. So is anybody doing mobility scoring at home?
Yeah, all the time.
All the time. So it's basically a 0 to 3 scoring system. And the 0 is cows that are sound, and at the other extreme you've got your score 3 animals. So your score 3 cow is the one really where she's losing a lot of milk. How many litres of milk do you think this animal is losing?
I can nearly go down to nothing.
Yeah. So the recorded figure through sort of data and research is about 1,000 litres. And if you multiply that up over whatever percentage of these cows you've got in your herd, then you're looking at a substantial cost to your business. So fertility, what am I talking about when we talk about fertility being impacted by lameness? They don't come bulling, yeah. If the feet hurt,
They're silent bullers, aren't they?
the silent bullers, yeah. And quite often they just don't. They're not getting up even out of the beds. They'll be milked, they'll eat, and they'll lie down, and that's them done. So the impacts of not getting a cow and calf obviously has an impact on the cost to your business. There's time. Any of you that are foot trimming? Yeah. So how much time do you spend on these score 3 cows?
Not enough.
Not enough. And when you get her in the crush, we actually spend a lot of time trying to fix them, don't they? So you'll see I've got some blocks on the table, we've got some bandages there, we've got some wraps to deal with, Duchy, and we're very up the front end about treating these problems, and in actual fact we need to be going back and looking at preventing the problems from these, not having these score 3 cows to deal with. Increased culling, so a lame cow is more likely to go out of the herd early. Labour, your time, the vet's time, and the time spent dealing with these critically lame cows, it all costs money. And the worse her immunity is, the more likely she is to get other problems, isn't she? It's like when you come back to college, you're more likely to pick up all the flus and bugs going around than you are at home. So if we just go through the structure of the foot, because as I said at the beginning, I think it's important to understand what we're dealing with in order to understand how we need to look about preventing it. So we've got some key structures here. So the main part I think to deal with first is the red part, which is the corium, and that's the really sensitive part, and it's no different to the sensitive tissue under our nail. It's basically full of sort of living tissue. It's got blood vessels, it's got nerves, it's got oxygen running through there. And it's extremely sensitive tissue, and any of you that are trimming will know you sort of press to feel for the corium, don't you, to see whether you've actually trimmed down too far. And what I want you to look at in this foot, I'll pass it round in a minute, is how little you've got to play with. Think of the outside of the hoof like a welly. So we can take our welly on and off, but these animals are stuck with it, and whatever you do to that animal in the crush, she's stuck with it. So you can over trim her and you can make her lame, you can dig at a lesion, you can make her more lame. And what I want you to take home from this session is picking these cows up earlier and preventing these severe lameness problems happening. So the corium is the bottom part of the sole here, that red area on the bottom. This produces the sole part of the hoof. So there's 2 parts of hoof growth. There's a sole part here and there's a wall part here. So the wall part grows like our nail. So it grows from our nail bed down, and then the bottom part of the hoof is grown by the corium. And anybody know what this line here is?
Coronary band, isn't it?
It's the white line, yeah. So this is the coronary band here, so it's like our nail bed. And actually this part of the horn is as hard as our nail. So when we talk about the weight bearing load, if you look at the sole, it translates to all this area here, which is your white line. And this bottom part of the sole is much softer, as you all know, those of you that trim. It's more like the pad of a dog or a cat. So very different sort of hardness levels, and that's why this sole part is much easier to trim. So the white line holds the 2 parts of the hoof together, and we talk about laminitis and laminae, and they basically are the glue that hold the welly on. They hold the horn in place. So when we talk about white line damage, the laminae run around the outside of the horn, and they're kind of 2 filaments like this. So when they're working well, they sit together like this. And when we put the cow on traumatic surfaces, such as the stones, we talked about that slipping in the collecting yard, it kind of starts tearing the laminae apart. So that trauma and that slipping and that skidding, we talked about cows having the heads up and not seeing where they're putting the feet, and you get this tearing of the laminae, and that's where you get your stones going in. So picking those cows up early, at early lame,
Really hot feet.
we get really hot feet, really tender feet.
We had one cow on putting her feet in the drinker, her front feet. We
Yeah,
didn't know what
to
that
cool
was
them
on.
down.
We couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Pick the feet up, that's what it was.
So when would you rather pick these animals up? When you've got the stone that's gone in, or 3 months later when all that infection's tracked up the hoof? So that's what happens with a white line, isn't it? You get a stone going in here on the white line. After 2 to 3 months, it's got nowhere to go, so the infection tracks up here, doesn't it? And it bursts out the top. When would you rather treat that animal? Yeah, so you'd rather treat her as soon as the stone goes in. So this is where mobility scoring comes in for your cynics in the audience. Picking them up, when they've got a stone in at early lame is much quicker, and it saves you much more money, time, money, litres. Picking up that stage rather than the bursting out stage, it's win-win. And what about bruising? Anybody know how bruising's caused?
If you got ulcers, they put extra pressure on the opposite side.
That's right. That's
on the
right.
bruise.
So a solar ulcer tends to happen on the outer claw, and that's because where she's doing all the twisting and turning.
Normally on the back feet as well.
Oh, nearly always on the back feet, and on the front feet it's the opposite. So on a cow with solar ulcers, you tend to see that they've crossed the front feet because they're just trying to get the pressure off of it. So we talked about stone damage, we talked about lying times, and they're all causes of solar ulcers. And what happens with a solar ulcer is this bone here is called the pedal bone. And I'll let you pass that foot round to have a look at some of the structures I've just talked about. So we've got this triangle shaped bone called the pedal bone. And basically this bone bears all the weight of the cow. So it's the equivalent to our sort of two ends of our bones here that the cow's standing on. So what weight is your average dairy cow? 650 kilos. So we've got 8 of these, and the weight's divided between them. They're a bit of a major design fault really, aren't they? And you can see that they're not a big bone, and you can see why things go wrong at the foot end. And it's this pedal bone that causes the solar ulcers. And what it does is when your cow's standing too much, or she's standing with the front feet in the cubicle and the back feet out, you can imagine this bone's kind of tipped up. And with this hook at the back, we get the nipping on the corium. And so if I put one of your fingers on here and just kind of tapped it for the next, 2 to 3 months, what do you think would happen? You get a bruise. So, and it's no different to this structure here. So the pedal bone nips the corium, and as that horn grows through, you get a bruise which turns into a solar ulcer. So again, which would you rather trim, guys? A solar ulcer or a bruise? Pardon? Bruise, yes, right answer. So the bruise, you would get her up in the crush, trim the bruise out, put her foot down and she's gone. How long would you spend treating a solar ulcer? Weeks, yeah. And the reason you spend weeks is something happens to the bone on these cows that have had a serious deep tissue infection. So this can happen with a bad case of digital dermatitis, it can happen with a bad case of solar ulcer, anything that's got inside the foot where you're starting to see damage to the tissue. And what you can see is the difference between those two bones. I'll let you pass them round, but you can see the normal pedal bone, it's got very smooth bone, it's got natural holes in where the blood vessels sit and the ligaments sit, and then you've got this bone here where you've got an exaggerated hole where the ligament sits. You've got damaged proliferated bone, and if you look on the sole of that damaged bone, you can see the difference there between the two bones. So this is your normal one and this is your damaged one. Do you think you can fix this through trimming and treatment and blocking? So you're going to find that your score 3 cows, your lame cows, are repeat offenders. You wonder why you're trimming these cows over and over again, and this is why, because you get these severe deep tissue infections, you get bone damage, and you just can't fix that. So again, which would you rather treat? A cow with a mild infection with a normal bone, or your deep tissue infection? Yeah, mild. So again, think about, I think it probably sounds a bit gimmicky to all of you, the mobility scoring, but it does work, it does do what it says on the tin, and if you do it regularly, you'll get these cows early. How am I doing for time?
Don't know. It's 10 to 1.
So if we think about the actual score itself, so we've talked a bit about identifying where your risks are. So if you're dealing with an infectious disease, you're not going to then start looking about your cubicle, your collecting yard, or the tracks that they're walking on. You're going to be looking at your foot bathing, you're going to be looking at your hygiene. If you're dealing with more horn problems like your white line problem and your solar ulcer, you're going to be looking more at your horn quality. And the common theme is that if we pick these cows early at this score 2, then you're more likely to get your problems early. And these cows get better quicker. So picking a cow up here, she takes about a month to get better. Picking a cow up here, she takes about 2 weeks to get better. So they get better quicker, they get back into milk production quicker, and they cost you less. And hopefully the horn stays better longer. So the mobility score is a 0 to 3 score. 0 is your sound cow. We're not too worried about her, and that's basically how we assess, how well our herd's doing. So we talk about good mobility and we talk about trends of these score 0s getting better. Number 1 is sort of your imperfect mobility. So we're not probably going to do anything with her, but she's on the radar because probably a score 1 is going to go to a score 2. And score 2 is the cow that I really want you to look out for today. Hopefully we'll get a couple of cows out and score them and have a look round. So just to give you an idea what you're looking at, I've put some, Tom talked at the beginning about cow behaviour, about cow signals. And the only way you'll spot these signals is if you're looking out for them. These cows are your best advisors, and if you don't look at what they're telling you, you're not going to pick the signals up. So there are 10 here. I'm not going to go all through all of them. But if you think about your score 3 cow, she's always at the back of the herd, isn't she? She walks slowly. She can't keep up with the pace of the herd.
And you try and walk them faster, and then it makes it worse, doesn't it?
That's right, yeah. So we know her, and you've probably already dealt with her, and there's no doubt we would agree. Pardon?
Never. Well, I know I'm guilty. Never given enough time to recover.
That's right, because they're just straight back in the herd, aren't they?
For
yeah.
a couple of days.
That's right.
It'd be a lot longer, really.
That's right.
The long run,
so, the big one with this is we talk about tracking up. So these score 3 cows, there's nowhere near going to happen, but on a healthy cow, they should be tracking up normally. And tracking up means is the back foot lands exactly where the front foot's left. So the back foot goes down exactly in the spot where the front foot left. And any of you that have got horses at home, you'll be uber sensitive to it, but it's the same with any animal, a dog or a cat. When we talk about tracking up, it's that we look at where the back foot lands in relation to the front foot. And a cow with a lame foot, it will always be slightly out, it will always be 1 or 2 steps out. And that will be where she's not wanting to put weight down on the lame foot. So tracking up's a really good indicator that you're looking at a score 2 animal, and you see early signs of not putting weight on one limb. The other one is even weight bearing. So it's quite easy, particularly on a house system, to listen to that rhythm. So a normal animal, your score 0, walks at a very even rhythm. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And your lame cow, she kind of misses a trip. So she'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. She's not wanting to put weight on, say, that back right, that sore limb. So looking at that rhythm of the way she walks. And then the other indicators are, has she got a head carriage even? Because if she's in a lot of pain, and you'll see it with your animals at home, she has a head down, doesn't she? And as she lifts that sore limb, she's nodding her head. You've got that kind of head nodding, limb lifting movement. So even movement is good mobility, really throwing those legs out evenly. And what you see on a score 2 cow is that just isn't happening, mainly the tracking up. So what I want to ask you when we're walking these cows round is, ask yourself, will this cow benefit from treatment? And if the answer's yes, she's a score 2 animal. And what I would say is get your head around the treatment part. Think of it as, an investigation or an examination. You're probably going to be 5 minutes in and out the crush with this animal. But the point is you're picking her up with a bruise or a stone in her foot or some early problem that you can fix before she gets to this stage. So I'll see if I can get a couple of cows out. I think they've all started lying down. So we'll just hold that cow there for a minute and we'll watch this one. So if you look at this cow here, watch her walking towards you and look at whether the back feet are landing where the front feet left. Is she doing that?
Yeah.
So would you say she's a score 0? Is she tracking perfectly? What score would you say this animal is? Pardon? What score would you say she is? Would she benefit from treatment?
Might do.
Have a look at her again. Go on.
Back right leg looks turned up.
Yeah, so look at that back right and see how far it's tracking away from the front right.
She's tracking stupid, seeing she's going around the corner.
No, and that is the point. You know, it's very mild, it's very subtle. And bear in mind, these are herd animals, aren't they? You know, and when they lived out in the prairies, they were bottom of the pecking order, they were bottom of the food chain. And they don't want to show you their pain. You know, the herd animals, they want to mask it as much as possible. So she doesn't want you to see it. It's very subtle behaviours we're talking about here. So have a look as she walks away and see whether she's swinging her legs inwards or outwards to kind of disguise if there's any pain going on.
Oh, yeah.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
She's wobbling her back end as she walks.
So would you think that cow would benefit from having her feet looked at? Yeah, so she's a 2. So it's getting your mindset slightly differently from treating these score 3 cows to sort of picking them up a bit earlier. And I can see it is another job on farm. It's something else you've got to do. But if you're looking at these cows regularly, you'll eradicate these ones. You'll stop these ones happening. So I'll show you the other cow. She's probably a different score altogether. Can you bring that other one down? So look at her behaviour. She's got a flat back. She's got her head held high. You can hear that rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. She's throwing her limbs out evenly. She would keep up with the pace of the herd, wouldn't she? Look at her as she walks away. Would you say she's perfect? Would you say she's a 0?
She's a 1.
Yeah, she's a 1, isn't she? And the point is, if you score regularly, so whether you score every month or whether you're every other month, you'll pick these cows up, you know, so that it's highly likely if she's a 1 now, next time you do your mobility scoring, she's going to be a score 2. So it is very subtle, isn't it? You know, these cows are giving you a subtle indicator that all isn't well. And if
Big jump to 3 though, isn't it?
it is, yeah, it is. And sometimes when I'm doing the farmer training, we end up talking about 2.5s and 1.5s.
Little 0, 1 and 2. Little things.
Yeah,
Big jump to get to 3.
it is, yeah. So it's all the more reason, you know, if in doubt, ask yourself, would she benefit from treatment or would she benefit from an examination? And if the answer's yeah, then just grab her. You know, you might just have her in the crush 5 minutes and let her go again. So we've got all of these recording sheets on the DairyCo website, and there's the sheets that you record onto. And what I would say is have a go at it. You know, it does do what it says on the tin. If you start picking these cows up at score 2 rather than 3, you will see a difference. You'll see a lot lower lameness levels. You'll see increased mobility in your herd. We've got tons of resources on the DairyCo website. Any of you that are putting blocks on, we just uploaded a video yesterday from Nottingham University onto the YouTube website on how to put blocks on. So think about, you know, your technique when you're doing some of these routine trims. Because if you put a block on badly, what do you think the impact of that is?
You twist the stretch ligaments, don't
That's it, you stretch ligaments and you can ruin them. So think about your routine trimming. I think my take-home messages are, if you're thinking of trimming or you are trimming, just check you're doing it right. Get yourselves on a course and check that you're getting the levels right, you've got the balance right, and you're not causing more problems for the herd. Secondly, I would say have a go at mobility scoring. You know, we've talked about the benefits of catching lameness early. It's to do with cost, it's to do with time, it's to do with yield, it's to do with cow welfare and cow health. And I think motivation, which type of cows would you rather handle, a lame herd or a non-lame herd?
At least a lame herd won't run away.
Wrong answer. So have a go at scoring. You know, you might find some cynicism out there at home farms, but have a go at it. And think about the risks. So what is it you're dealing with at home? Because it's no good focusing on foot bathing if you're dealing with white line issues. It's no good looking at cubicle design and the flooring if you've got digi, if you've got an infectious problem. So think about what is it you're dealing with and how you manage that risk, and have a go at it, you know. So any questions?
That cow there, standing like funny with her leg turned out, would that be a foot problem, or would that be something like maybe up in her hip or higher up in her leg?
I think it's probably a foot problem, but you know, it's a good point that, you know, some cows just don't walk well, do they? You know, if we're standing at the Royal Cornwall show and your mobility scored 100 farmers walking past, you know, you'd see all sorts, wouldn't you? See bad backs, bad hips, bad knees, and it's just, I guess, eliminating what the problem is. So pick the foot up and have a look, and then you think, well, there's nothing going on there. Maybe it's, you know, something else going on. But no, it's a good point. You know, sometimes it's not always a foot problem. But do have a look at the DairyCo website. We've got loads of resources on there. And if you're going to have a go at scoring, make sure it's you, the same person, that does it all the time, because it's very subjective, but it does do what it says on the tin. So thanks very much.